and she's making her way. She's finding her own voice, and Godspeed to her. We wish her great luck with all of that. The kids are all handsome and beautiful, and of course they're the brightest children on the face of the earth, most beautiful and perfect in every way. And it's interesting to see them evolve, and we hope that they all have wonderful lives, and that we get to see that happen, or live long enough to see it happen. And we're working on that. We're working very hard on that. Connie and I are both in very good health at this stage. There's no wood here.
There's wood.
There's wood. It's not plastic. And we hope that good health maintains itself and that we survive for many years. I hope that what we've put aside for that purpose lasts, of course, which is something you begin to worry about at this stage. And so far, things are okay, and we hope that happens, continues to happen.
Dave, you talked about how the club environment has evolved over the years and changed, and given some great thoughts and opinions about that. Take us back to when your family was young, though, and what it was like to go over there as a family. And I mean, would you spend the whole day there, and maybe share a story about going to the members' dining room upstairs?
Well, there's so many memories. I mean, they flow through my head as I think about it. But when we first joined the club, the upstairs was the dining room, and thanks to Vic Ermel, who put on the big room that you could look out over the golf course, that used to be a roof. In fact, it was on top of there wasn't anything there. There was a patio down below. So we didn't have that extension on the club. And we would go up there for dances on Friday nights and those kinds of things. The family dining, actually, in the early days was, it would happen on special days. There were always, Christmas holiday parties and Thanksgiving, things to do. But the family dining, it was always a dress-up place. You didn't go in there in jeans and t-shirts and tennis shoes. It was kind of an occasion to go to the club, and I think maybe the kids weren't all that excited about it, but we were all happy to show them off. And Sunday brunches were a big deal up there, and that was always good. And the club was used, it was more a center of social life than it is today. And as having served as chairman of the entertainment committee early on with Dick Jansen and his wife, we had, we tried to really spruce that thing up. And I remember we put the social calendar, there was no P&Ls for the parties, so nobody knew whether they made money or lost. So one of the improvements we put in was, let's put a P&L system in for these social events and figure out which ones are successful and which aren't. We'll keep track of all of that, and we'll be able to weed out the things that nobody wants to attend to, and so on. And but we'll eventually we'll be able to do this thing better, and we'll also be able to figure out what works and what doesn't. So we pursued that for a couple of years and had some success. And certainly we put it in place, and it's one of those things you get lost in time. But part of the whole committee system at one point was to have a standing record for every committee with minutes, annual records of budgets and success, and so on and so forth, which actually led to the resurrection of the salvation, really, of the Lakewood-Westwood Jamboree. Bob Titmus and I, who had won the previous year when we were, and I can't remember exactly the year, but we had won the Jamboree. And it used to be then that last year's winners became the next year's chairman of the event. So we opened up the books to find out what you do. Well, there wasn't much there. So we put in place, I think Gary had put some things in place, and he had put a little nest egg budget in there to sustain the event going forward. But we decided that this particular event was so important to really the clubs of both clubs that we wanted to instill it as a tradition that should never be violated. So we put together kind of a blue book or a bylaw for it and how it should operate and when you had to do what by when and how much money it would cost to do it. And we rotated the big parties each year because they were sellouts. We got it up so that instead of one afternoon or 2 afternoons, we were able to fill the place up so we had starting times both morning and evening, or both morning and afternoon. And I think at one point we had 116 teams playing, something like that. And lots of lifetime friendships were made through that. Bob Titmus and I have remained friends forever. We've had business partnerships together, things of that nature. So there are lots of traditions that evolve out of the old committee structure and traditions that have been lost. In fact, I see that now we're going to compete against what the people that we used to have as our brothers in this year's format, which I think is a mistake. But I do like the idea of having a women's jamboree back to back with a men's jamboree. I think that's a great idea. And I think Eli Corey's wife is largely responsible for putting that in place. And kudos to her. The other parts of that life that were important was certainly the swim team. Our kids swam on the swim team, at least the girls did, until they were in high school. Dan never was a swimmer because he was a golfer. And he practiced and played at Lakewood as a junior golfer. He started in junior golf there. He played with Sheehan's boys and many others. And they're still friends to this day, long distance friends, but they still recognize each other and talk to each other. So golf and swimming were the primary activities, we did go to, we had all the 4th of July parties. We'd never missed those, and they were big events. And they would ebb and flow with the quality of the chairmen who were running them. But the chairmen of the committees were very active during those days, and they took a lot of pride in what their committees accomplished. And they were careful to select people that they could work with and trust. And committee tenure wasn't in and out. It was, the chairman would last for a couple of years and would breed a successor to take over the responsibilities. And so the committee structure was stronger in those days. And as recommended in the Code of Regulations, as recommended in the code and as stated in the bylaws. So it was a different animal. The life at the club for the children was, I'd say, reflected the lives of the fathers at the club. And the fathers were somewhat absent, so the children were somewhat absent. But the mothers, those mothers at the pool still had that duty, if you would, and dads would show up for events. So it was, still kind of a male-dominated society in those days, and so in some ways, I don't like to reflect on those years of family life because of the differences and the pain that it caused later in some of my relations with the children. So I kind of don't like to think about it as much. So it's a bittersweet thing for me. And I don't know if all men have that, all guys our age have that problem, but it occurs in my case. So in ways, I would think the country club is bittersweet for the children in some ways too. Although Amy and Ken were members there at Lakewood, it was not necessarily a good experience for them, and they left. She would probably not want me to say this publicly, but so edit it if you will.
Okay. Let me ask you a question on personality. Going back on years and those fellows that were really fun or stood out or were jovial or they were crazy but they were wonderful or, you know, that type of, do you remember any of those?
Oh, sure. I don't remember if you remember a guy by the name of Zitzman, John Zitzman. John was a character. And one Lakewood day, they used to have a shotgun out there to start the thing with, or they'd blow it off every once in a while. Well, Zitzman got his hands on this shotgun and was going around hiding in bushes, and as you were putting, he was exploding the shotgun. Well, I was playing with Dick Jansen. We were on the 9th green, and I could see Zitzman creeping around behind the bushes. And Jansen was over the putt, and just as he was ready to hit it, this gun went off. And I thought Jansen was not happy about this. I thought he was going to have a heart attack, to tell you the truth. That he wasn't that far away from him. So we had a good laugh, but I think Jansen, he was upset about that for several more years. But Zitzman is the same guy who, during an invitational, who I forget exactly what the incident was, but it was some celebration. He said, if I don't make this putt, I'm going to jump in the lake. This was on New 12. He didn't make the putt, and he ran and he jumped right in the lake, and, you know, much to everyone's delight. But he was always a friendly guy and a very, very interesting and funny man. And I don't know how long he lasted as a member, but it was a few years.
I remember him at the invitational that evening, at the conclusion of the awards and winning teams and so on. They gave him the Mark Spitz Award because Spitz had won all those gold medals.
That's
in
right.
the Olympics at that time. So they had a trophy for him and brought him up, and it was really a tie-in of that whole.
Yeah.
That probably the women never even thought about or heard about, and it came right out. And everybody had a great time with it.
Well, of course, Hoot Gibson was always a hoot. A little unpredictable in his behavior, and I was not there the night he rode his motorcycle into the bushes, but that story is famous. I'm just trying to think of other characters who, more than the characters, it's the guys I admired more than anything that I like to bring forward. And I spoke of Don Burney. I think Don is an unsung hero who has contributed every year of his life to the club in some way, some measurable way. Presidents I admired would include, Rich Maripesi, I think. In my 40-some years out there, was the best president we've had. Rich did it all right. He did not get the succession right, but he got everything right up to that point. And I would say that there were years in there where the club really was very short of cash, and somehow we always made it through. We didn't really start the double dusing thing as a convenience until the boards felt that they could, which was really an assessment. They felt that they could do that under the rules because it was operating expenses, and they could double dues people for coverage of shortages. And that really didn't occur until the last decade or so. Before that, it would never have been done. For one reason, people were running on budgets that didn't allow for an extra month's dues in the early days. There wasn't the kind of cash available that we had suddenly starting to develop during the 90s. The golden 90s were really, as you know, many golf courses were built in the 90s, just like they were built in the 20s, because there was a lot of excess cash, and guys wanted to be able to enjoy it in the style that they thought was appropriate. Country clubs are expensive, and if you to recognize how much after-tax dollars, how many after-tax dollars you need to make them work. It's really a serious business matter that all boards should take into consideration. But I'm trying to think of some more fun things. You always get me, I always revert back to the business and the structure of the club because that's where I spent my life. And
Well, to that point, Dave, while it's churning
Yes.
in your mind a little bit, in the few minutes we have left, just kind of tick off, it sounds like you've been involved in numerous committees, you've been on the
Yeah.
board. Can you just go through what you recall about what committees and when you were on the board?
well, I think I've served on every committee, either as chairman or as a member at the club. With the exception of Greens, I've never been on the Greens committee. But all the other committees seem to fit my skills better, which include planning and conceptualizing things. But I served